Hi everyone and welcome back. Today is a big day for me in the kitchen because we have some leftover mashed potatoes and we're going to make a recipe that has been handed down in my family for a long time. Edna E.B. Heller is a relative of mine. Now as you know, I'm adopted and my birth middle name was Heller. That's what it says on my birth certificate. She wrote a book about Pennsylvania Dutch cooking back in the 1950s. And this cookbook is my ultimate favorite. As you can see, what is Pennsylvania Dutch cooking? Well, it's simple. It's carbohydrates. It's a lot of pork. It's a lot of chicken. It's a lot of potato rolls. It's a lot of breads and pies and cookies. It's comfort food. So, and noodles. Oh, we cannot forget the noodles and pot pie. Today we're gonna make potato bread, but I'm not gonna just make one loaf of potato bread. We're gonna make enough so I can put the dough in the freezer. I bet some of you didn't know that. You can make bread dough and put it in the freezer just like commercial. The only thing is you need to add a little more yeast if you're going to freeze your dough. The dough is good for about 6 months, but most of the times people have it already used up by then. So I'm gonna make a whole bunch of them. I'm going to share with you the recipe in the description box below, how to make homemade Pennsylvania Dutch potato rolls. And these are amazing. Have you ever heard of Martin's potato rolls? I don't know if they're anywhere other than on the Northeast, but this is much better than those even. All right, so let's show you. All we're going to do is first, we're going to proof our yeast. We're going to take 2 cups of warm water, and then we're going to go ahead and add our yeast and our sugar. And we are proofing that. That means we're going to make sure the yeast is alive and bubbly before we add all the ingredients, because there's nothing worse than adding all of your ingredients and finding out your yeast is no longer alive. Tip number 1, you want to keep yeast almost indefinitely? Freeze it. Put your yeast in the freezer, keep it in there, and that will keep almost indefinitely. If you don't have freezer space, you can go ahead and put it in your refrigerator, and that will last you for at least a year. I have some yeast that is 3 years old in my freezer, and it still works perfect. We'll go ahead and we're going to proof our yeast. I'm making a double batch, so we have 2 cups of warm water with 1 tablespoon of yeast and a little bit of sugar to feed it. You need either sugar or honey to feed your yeast so it rises. One thing you learned about me by now is when I make a recipe, I don't make a small one, I make a large one, because if I'm going to all the trouble, I make sure I have enough that I can have it for future days. Because I do have my children over often, I love having this on hand. Now, my mom had some dough overnight. She would keep it overnight and would make rolls accordingly. I'm going to do that. So let me explain this to you. I'm going to make some to freeze. I'm going to make some to keep in the refrigerator because I'm going to have my children for the next couple days here. On and off, they're going to come for a meal. And then I'm going to make some right away. I hope this all makes sense to you. Like when I do something, I do it big because that's just how I live. All right, so I'm using my big mixer. Now you can mix this by hand. My very plain Mennonite friend Sharon would mix everything up by hand, large quantities of food, but I am using the mixer because it makes life so much easier. We're gonna go ahead and mix all of the flour and everything in here, and then I'll show you what we do next. Another reason why I'm making this is to use up all of my eggs. I have lots and lots of eggs. So each recipe calls for 3 eggs. Because these are smaller eggs, I'm going to go ahead and use 4. All right. Then it calls for 1/2 cup of oil, and I always use either bacon fat or I use shortening. So we are going to use, for this batch, we're going to use some bacon fat. That is the true Pennsylvania Dutch way of doing things. They would save that. And then it calls for 1 cup of sugar. It smells so good already. Just the yeast bubbling and everything else, it just smells amazing. Now we're going to add 1 cup of mashed potatoes. Yum, yum. A tablespoon of salt. Now I normally don't use quite so much salt. I will probably use only about a teaspoon of salt. A tablespoon seems to me an awful lot, and I've never made it with that much. Just a teaspoon of salt is perfect. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to add our yeast mixture. And we're going to mix this up, adding the flour. I'm going to go ahead and add about 2 cups of flour to start. It calls for 7 cups in all. This is where you go by your eyesight because it can either take more flour or less flour. All right, while that's mixing up, I'm going to assemble all of my ingredients to make more and more and more of these. I'm going to make it enough till my potatoes are empty. So I think I can do 2 more batches. All right, I'm going to use these plastic bowls to store all of my dough in until I work on it. So I want to make sure I grease them really well. And then you always put a plastic wrapping or some kind of tea towel that's damp on top, so you don't want your dough to dry out. So I'm going to go ahead and put my dough in these. All right, so I got all the bread dough done and I have a real mess. I'm going to wash up my dishes. So I'm going to wash my dishes up and then we will work on the rolls. So I made 4 large batches. I'm going to clean up my kitchen. I'm going to put all the dough in the refrigerator, and then I will see you 24 hours later, and then we'll work on the rolls. So with the magic of the camera, I'll see you 24 hours later with a clean kitchen, and then we can restart and work on the rolls. All right, we got everything cleaned up, and now we're ready to make the rolls. Now, the other bread that I made is going to be used in other videos, which you will see in future videos of mine. This video would be way too long if I tried to do everything in one video. So here our dough has risen. We're going to punch it down, and then I'm going to probably only be using half of it today. One batch is going to give me, it's about 4 loaves of bread, or 3 loaves and some rolls. Well, what we're going to do is, to freeze it, we're going to roll them tightly in wax paper. Now I'm using a lot of wax paper because I don't want to get freezer burnt. All right, so there's 1. I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to roll these all up. Make rolls with them today. So we're going to just sprinkle a little flour. Now there are different ways that you can make rolls. I'm doing it the way my mom did. You could take and make rolls this way by making little balls like that, but I am doing it the way my mom did, and she used a cutter. So we're going to go ahead and roll this all out. Now, the thinner you roll them out, the thinner they will be. It's all about preference. You can use a glass drinking glass if you want to use that. You don't have to have a special cutter to cut it. All right. I want a nice puffy roll, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to have it rolled out like that. Now what we're going to do is take a cutter and we're going to cut little rounds. We're going to let these rise till double, and then we're going to bake them 350 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. It all depends.